Chapter 4. Much of my life up to that point had been spent at home with my parents. I hadn't faced any serious challenges to my beliefs. I believed in God, and I believed everything my grandmother taught me. There was never a reason to question any of it. I truly felt that God was watching over me and guiding me through every challenge, whether it was school or life in general. The care I received from my grandmother during my illness inspired me to do the same for others, whether friends or strangers, and it felt good to live in a way I knew would make her proud. I had become so accustomed to this way of life that I never considered there might be any other way to live. The safe bubble my childhood had created was challenged when I left home to study engineering in college. I was in my late teens and had never been away from home for any real length of time. Now I was living on campus with complete freedom to explore and make my own choices. I met people from all walks of life, each carrying different beliefs and ways of seeing the world. Some held religious convictions that were unfamiliar to me. Others questioned everything. I spoke with people who embraced existential nihilism, and others who believed that every event in life is part of a divine plan set by a higher being that transcends time and space. On one occasion, I remember a conversation with a close female friend who had recently learned that the woman she had called mom all her life was not her biological mother. That revelation shook her so deeply that she no longer felt certain about anything in her life. I could see the confusion and anguish in her face as she spoke. She had begun to question everything, and as I listened, I found myself carrying some of her burden. It made me start looking at my own past more closely, questioning things I had always taken for granted. On a separate occasion, I recalled having a long late-night conversation with an atheist friend of mine about God and why he did not believe in God. I shared my own experience, but that did not seem to satisfy him. I wanted him to see life the way that I saw it, but it bothered me that I was not able to get through to him. I did not share all the details of my childhood illness and recovery with him, or the role that I believed God had played in it. Still, I felt a yearning to learn more about my faith. As if by providence, I ran into an old friend who soon invited me to join him in Bible study, and despite the high college workload plus working 30 hours a week at my job, I decided to make an effort to join him. I was interested in learning more about the Bible, because the surface-level knowledge I had could not stand up to the critical examination from my atheist friend. I felt I needed a deeper understanding of my faith in order to respond to the kinds of questions and objections my atheist friend raised. At first it was difficult to find time, but eventually we met. My friend brought along another friend of his, and together we began studying the Bible. We started with a few well-known passages about Jesus and God, but before long, the conversation shifted toward me and my personal commitment to God. I was caught off guard. It surprised me that they would question my devotion when I had spent my entire life trying to help others as best I could. To me, that was my way of giving back to God for everything He had done for me. Now that I was in college, I was focused on paying my tuition and staying on top of my studies. But they did not think I was prioritizing the right things. They told me that my commitment to God was not genuine, and that I needed to take my faith more seriously. They also said I should forget about my family, because my family could not get me into heaven. They added that I needed to surround myself with like-minded people of the same faith in order to strengthen my relationship with God and secure my place in heaven. In other words, they wanted me to leave behind my family and friends and adopt them as my new family exclusively. So here I was, having seen my grandmother give so much of herself to help me recover from an illness no one understood. Everything she taught me stood in stark contrast to what I was now being told. She had taught me about the importance of family and the responsibility of taking care of those we love. Naturally, I protested. I told them that I did not agree with their interpretation of the Christian life. They responded by telling me that I was not a Christian, and that it would take much more work on my part to become one. But when they saw that I was holding firm to my childhood beliefs, they invited me to meet with them again, and we set a date for the next Bible study. This time, however, 3 people showed up to the session, and one of them was a pastor. The pastor focused on one point, that I was not saved, that I was not a Christian, and that I was heading to hell. I told them that I was offended. It hurt to hear them say I was not a Christian, despite my own assurance of my faith. They told me it was normal to feel that way, as if to suggest I would come around in due time. At the end of that session, they invited me to attend their church the following Sunday so they could introduce me to their church family. I accepted the invitation and joined them. When I arrived, they welcomed me warmly and praised me along with the other guests for taking the step of coming to church. I observed everything, met the congregation and the newcomers, and overall had a good experience at the service. Still, I was not convinced by their views, though I was open to continuing the conversation. Soon, we were meeting twice a week, and the pastor had become a regular at the Bible studies. At one meeting, the pastor told me that I had a choice to make. I could commit to meeting more often and start showing signs that I was becoming a Christian, or they would stop meeting with me. Once again, they told me I was closer to hell than heaven. Needless to say, I was not very happy about what I was hearing. Their perspective began to weigh on me. I remember thinking to myself that I needed to understand more about my faith, but I was becoming certain that they were not the ones who could help me find that understanding. Their insistence that I see them as my only family was something I could not accept. It went against everything my grandmother taught me, and I had more faith in my grandmother than I had in them. Eventually, when it became clear they could not change my mind, they stopped meeting with me. When I saw them on the street and greeted them, they acted as if they had never met me. Their coldness gave me a strange sense of peace. It made me feel even more confident that I had been right to walk away from them and their point of view. Still, I knew I had more to learn. I wanted to understand life more fully, and to explore what it really meant to live a meaningful life. Up to that point, my view of life had been narrow, and now I found myself developing a deep thirst to learn as much as I could about the world. After having my views challenged, I figured the best way to understand more about God and my faith was to start reading the Bible on my own. The Bible study group had left me in a state of despair, and I realized I couldn't rely on others to tell me what to believe. If I was ever going to find the truth, I had to seek it for myself. Still, I had pressing questions. One of the biggest was whether my grandmother could have been wrong. If she was, then what did I owe my healing to? Was it chance? One thing was certain, I was going to find out one way or another.
Just then I realized it was already 4:23 a.m. in the morning. I had lost track of time, but I still had 190 more pages to go in the book. It felt like I was just about to get to the meat of the book. I was tired and sleepy, and so I put the book down on my desk and went to bed with the plan of picking it back up in the morning. I woke up around 10:15 a.m. on Sunday morning, which meant that I had about 8 hours to finish reading the book before Sophia departed for the airport. I quickly freshened up and realized that I never had a chance to go to the market to get groceries. My car was still not working, and so I decided it would be a good time to get groceries. It was still raining, and so I took my umbrella with me. I walked to the nearby grocery store to pick up a few items. I got back to the apartment and made myself an omelette. As I ate, I began to think about what I read the night before. I wondered what Sophia's husband discovered about life. I felt that I was at the same point in my life. Everything that I knew had been turned into chaos. There was an order to my life when I was in a relationship with my girlfriend. I knew I had someone I could count on, someone to talk to and share my life with. Now that she is gone, my life is in a state of chaos. Does this happen to everyone in life? It was about 12:20 p.m. when I picked up the manuscript again and began to read it.
I went to the library and began reading books about the Christian faith. One of the first I picked up was Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr. I read it in one sitting. After that, I picked up another one called A Knock at Midnight. I supplemented my Bible study with commentaries on various passages. I found the Old Testament especially difficult to get through, but I kept reading, mostly because I could not leave a task unfinished. So I kept searching. Along the way I discovered the great philosophers Descartes, de Montaigne, de Beauvoir, Hume, Kant, Nietzsche, Hegel, Pascal, and many others. Their views ranged from pure reason to a blend of reason and emotion and everything in between. I found no relief, despite the coherence of their arguments. My childhood experience had cemented in me a view that was not going to be easily discarded. During my search, I began to notice a common thread among all of these thinkers. Life is inherently painful, and in the end, time wins. Time eats away at you until it consumes you. That realization stirred an existential angst deep within me. Instead of finding answers to my questions, I uncovered even more questions I didn't even know to ask at the outset. I realized I needed more time to learn about life than I had between my schoolwork and my job at the college cafeteria. I decided to look for a different work-study position that would give me more time to read and reflect. I had always been drawn to piano music, so I applied for a job at the music school. I figured it would be less demanding and would give me the space to both play and continue my search. 1 week later, I started my new work-study job at the School of Music, helping set up the stage for student performances. My boss mentioned that a new hire would be starting the following week, and that I would be responsible for showing her around. I did not think much of it at the time, and actually forgot about it until she knocked on the door and introduced herself. She was good-looking, but what stood out was the genuine kindness and warmth in the way she carried herself. I gave her a quick introduction to the job with plenty of time to spare. Since there was nothing going on that night, we settled into the office. At the time, I was more interested in searching for the meaning of life than in engaging in conversation. But she asked what I was reading, and when I told her, she kept asking question after question. I answered out of politeness, but before long I put the book away, and we found ourselves in the middle of a lively, engaging conversation. She showed a genuine interest in me as a person, and that caught me by surprise. There was an easy charm about her and a sharpness of mind that drew me in. We ended up talking non-stop until our shift was over. In fact, we got so lost in conversation that we stayed 20 minutes past our shift without even realizing it. We talked for nearly 5 hours that night. The more we talked, the more I liked her, and the more I liked her, the more attractive she became. When we finally left the building, neither of us mentioned that we had stayed late. It was not lost on me, but I wasn't going to bring it up if she wasn't. We shared a warm smile as we said goodbye. I told her how much I enjoyed our conversation, and she responded in kind. She took the train home, and I walked back to my dorm room. That was, by a wide margin, the best conversation I had ever had with someone I had just met. To say I was smitten would be an understatement. The next weekend she dressed beautifully, like a soloist about to take the stage. Of course, I noticed the difference from the weekend before. But with a full program of student performances, we barely had a moment to talk. The following weekend was much quieter, and we were able to spend more time together. I found myself thoroughly enjoying her company. One weekend, a story in the campus newspaper caught her attention. A young college woman had been robbed at gunpoint near campus. She told me about it, and I could see she was visibly unsettled. After work, I offered to walk her to the train stop and waited with her until her train arrived. When the train arrived and she turned to leave, I noticed tears beginning to form in her eyes. She looked away quickly, hoping I hadn't noticed. She boarded the train and took a seat by the window on the side where I was standing. Just before the train pulled away, she turned and waved goodbye. Her expression in that moment said more than words ever could. It wasn't just gratitude. There was something deeper in her eyes, a quiet recognition that the small gesture had touched her in a way she hadn't anticipated. The following weekend, she called and offered to bring me dinner on her way in. What she brought was nothing short of a feast. We sat and ate, talking as if we had known each other for years. Our friendship was blossoming, and it felt like it had the potential to grow into something more. Later that evening, while we were moving a piano for a student performance, she asked if I would play one of my compositions for her. As I played, she stood beside me, resting lightly against the piano, listening in silence. When I finished, I turned to see her eyes filled with tears. She had been so moved by the music that it brought her to tears. Her sensitivity surprised me. Music clearly touched something deep inside her. Gently, I offered her my handkerchief and gave her a quiet side hug. The look she gave me at that moment made me feel for the first time that she might have fallen in love with me. Things moved quickly after that. We began talking about anything and everything, except the one thing that had by then become obvious to both of us. I felt certain we were drawn to each other in a romantic way. Up to that point, I had never been in a serious relationship, and she began to occupy my thoughts to the point where I could not wait to see her again. At the same time, I was torn. I wasn't sure if a long-distance relationship could work between us. But the fear of letting her slip away was stronger than any doubts I had. The attraction between us was unmistakable, and I was ready to take the chance, even though I knew she would be leaving in just a few weeks to return home to Portland, Oregon.
Just then it hit me. Her husband must be talking about Sophia in the story because that's where she's heading tomorrow afternoon. Wow, I thought. What a beautiful connection.
I finally worked up the courage to ask her out to the movies. She said yes, but mentioned her friend's birthday was that Friday, so Sunday would be better. Saturdays were already packed for both of us with work. On Saturday, she called me and brought dinner on her way in. We talked about our plans for Sunday, and I was so excited I could barely sleep that night. I was determined to let her know how I felt about her after the movie. I had it all planned out. The theater was close to her dorm, so we met there and walked over together. We decided on an action thriller. It was a long, gripping movie, and we both enjoyed it immensely. Honestly, the movie could have lasted 10 hours and I wouldn't have minded. I was just happy to be with her. After the movie, I invited her to a nearby coffee shop so we could continue our conversation. Over warm drinks and soft background music, she opened up about her life, her past, and the future she envisioned. We connected on many levels, including spiritually. For the first time, I felt I had found someone I could truly talk to, someone who understood the kinds of questions I was asking about life, truth, and the search for meaning. I was certain then that I had found someone who could be more than a friend. I had found someone I could fall in love with. Up to that point, we had not explicitly addressed the idea of a romantic relationship. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, she revealed that she had a boyfriend back home in Portland, Oregon. My heart sank instantly. The shock was so profound that I could not hide my discomfort. I tried to play it off, but she could see it in my face. She quickly explained that she was not in love with the boyfriend, and that it was her mother who was more invested in the relationship. Her mother had even expressed interest in the idea of an arranged marriage, but she believed in finding love for herself. I laughed nervously and asked why she never told me about her boyfriend before.
You never asked. And I didn't want to bring it up unless it became necessary.
When I asked why now, she paused and said softly,
"Because I've been falling for you ever since the night you walked me to the train stop."
Hearing that brought a wave of relief. My heart, which had just sunk, now swelled with hope. I reached across the table, took her hands, and told her how I felt. Tears formed in her eyes. We both knew, without needing to say it, that the road ahead would not be easy. We had found something meaningful in each other, but we could not move forward just yet. We agreed to wait before expressing our feelings physically, until she ended things with her boyfriend. She insisted on breaking up with him in person rather than over the phone. I was not excited about the idea, but I understood her desire to do the right thing. We were both faced with the possibility of having no physical contact until she returned to school in September, which was still 4 months away, unless we found a way to see each other sooner. That night the coffee shop closed early since it was a Sunday, so I walked her back to her dorm. We took the longest route possible, stopping at a small park just to enjoy a few more moments together. It was a beautiful night. But now the hard part was here. We had opened Pandora's box, and there was no going back. The next few weeks proved emotionally challenging, but also a blessing in disguise. Without the distractions of physical intimacy, we focused entirely on getting to know one another. We spent hours talking on the phone and in person. During our shifts at work, we read together and shared our thoughts on everything from marriage and raising children to politics and what it means to live a meaningful life. In those conversations, we often lost track of time. Those were the moments that gave me my first real taste of what meaning felt like. We reflected on whether happiness should be the ultimate goal of life. Both of us concluded that happiness is too fleeting to be a solid foundation. If we tried to build a life around it, we would likely end up disappointed. Even our own budding love, as hopeful as it felt, was also filled with pain. We both knew that her return home and the end of her current relationship would bring more emotional weight before it brought relief. The longing to be physically close was hard to resist. Ironically, we had shared more physical affection before we confessed our feelings than afterward. Now, with everything in the open, we felt a responsibility to wait. Staying focused on our studies became difficult as we found ourselves constantly thinking about each other. We were in constant communication, yet we could not fully enjoy our time together because of the restraint we had chosen. Still, we believed it was the right thing to do. We wanted our present actions to benefit both who we were at that moment and who we hoped to become. If we gave in to temptation, it might feel good in the short term but could leave us with long-term regret. But if we practiced patience, we believed it would strengthen our relationship in the future. It would show that we could honor our values even while longing for more. We turned to Stoic philosophy for guidance, searching for techniques that could help us develop self-discipline and resist the pull of immediate gratification. We learned that the more consistently the mind can control its impulses, the more control a person can gain over the body and over life itself. We understood that we were not just building a relationship. We were laying the foundation for something lasting. It would not be based on passion alone, but on shared values, mutual respect, and a deeper sense of purpose. Love, we were learning, is not something to hurry. It is something to cultivate.